Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome back. Yes, we are back. Not really. I'm back. Steve's not here. Steve's off making the moolah. He's off making the money. He's off making the Lady Godiva, the fiver. My name is Michael Barth. This is a PorscheCooled Podcast. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you have, welcome back. It's been a while. It feels like a long time, actually. As you guys realize, I took 2 weeks. Well, the podcast took 2 weeks break, primarily because I have been in Dubai. I'm back in Bahrain now, but I've been in Dubai for the last, we're there for 16 nights. 16 nights in Dubai. I'll get onto that shortly. But this is episode 140 of the PorscheCooled Podcast. I haven't been doing nothing this week. I have actually been recording some future owner stories. I've had a couple of great owners that I've chatted to already, and I'm talking to another two owners in the next couple of days on Friday, and I think I've got someone on Saturday as well. You guys are, it's just amazing how many people have reached out to me. I mean, there's so many people reaching out to me, and I do apologize once again with owner stories. That I do take a little while to get back now. I don't take a long time to get back. I'll always answer you, but I take a little while to get to schedule you in. But I am going to catch up in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to do a few owner stories every week so I can catch up on you guys who have been waiting for some time to chat with me and tell me about your Porsche and about your story. So I recorded a few this week. Let's just get on to, I just want to do the usual shout outs that I like to do. Patreon, as you guys know, Patreon is the place where you guys can support the podcast. As you know, the podcast is completely free. It's completely voluntary. You don't have to do it, but it is there if you want to support the podcast. Small financial support. It starts at $2 to, this is US dollars, of course, $2 to $10 a month. And we have one new member of PorscheCooled this week, and it wasn't actually this week. I think it was just before I went to Dubai. I'm catching up on these, obviously, because I haven't done the shout-outs for 2 weeks. And that was Sashin. Sashin, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it very much. I don't know what you drive, if you own a Porsche or you don't own a Porsche. I did send you a message through Patreon. You haven't responded yet, but that's okay. But hopefully in the coming weeks, I will know more about your story and I'll mention it again on the podcast. Like I said, if you want to join Patreon, you just go to patreon.com/PorscheCooled or just search PorscheCooled Patreon in Google. It comes up and then it's quite easy, the process they have there where you can just support the podcast on a monthly basis. PorscheCooled owner stories. I hope you guys listened to that story this week. If you haven't, check it out. It's number 52 with Philip. I had a really good chat with Philip. Philip's in Brussels. He's in Belgium. He's friends with Alan, who has been on before. You remember Alan. He had Alan was on owner stories number 45, and Alan had the 78 Porsche 924 Outlaw, very cool car, had a really good story. Him and Philip are friends. But Philip had a good story because he has been exposed to Porsche for a long time. He's a car fanatic, as he first said in his message to me. He knew all the car brands when he was a kid. His first Porsche memory is a memory which I think most of us would love to have, is when he was about 10. His father went out and bought a 911. And over the period of his childhood, his dad had owned many 911s, from a 964s to 993s, and then the final one was a 996. The 996 was when Philip was just starting to learn to drive. Philip, I hope I've got all this right because I'm doing it from memory. Philip was able to drive. So the 996 was the car he actually did drive in. He didn't drive in the others because he was too young. He didn't drive in the 964 or the 993, but he did have a memory of driving in the 996 when he first got his license or when he was learning to drive. So he had that Porsche childhood that we all kind of dream of, that, we're immersed in the Porsche culture. Our father's got multiple Porsches. It's a different, I don't know if it's a different way of seeing it now in when he's older, but he has come back to that 996. He has come back to that 996, which his father owned, the 996, which he did get a chance to drive in. His first one was actually, no, he didn't buy the 996 first. What am I saying? Philip bought the 944. I'm giving away the whole story. I'll stop. I won't give too much more away. But he had a 944, was the first one he owned. Had it for a few years, drove it a lot, really enjoyed it. Then he got a 996. I've seen pictures of the 996. It's on the PorscheCooled Instagram. If you flip through those images of the post for Philip's story, you'll see the blue one. He sold that to his cousin. So basically what he decided to do, he's looking one night, he found this car. I'm not going to give too much away. It wasn't advertised as what it was. It was something better. It was a GT3. So he decided to, well, in the end, he decided that he had to sell the 944 and the 996, the blue one that he had, and get the GT3, which he does. And now he's got a 2001 GT3 in silver. As Philip said, it's a high mileage car, which didn't bother him. It's quite a high mileage GT3. It's a car that's been driven. But what's great about the car is it's a one owner. He bought it from the original owner. He had a good conversation with the son. It's got a good story to it. And I really, if you're going to listen to one more podcast this weekend, listen to Owner Stories number 52 with Philip. Go and give him a follow and tell him you really enjoyed his story as well. His Instagram is at j.low_GT3. That's at j.low_GT3. If you want to come on to Owner Stories, you want to be on the podcast, you want to chat about your Porsche story, your Porsche journey, just reach out to me on Instagram. It's always the best way, at PorscheCooled, which is my the main Instagram for the podcast. There's also P997.1 or at michael.bath. Either of those, any of those, you'll get a hold of me. PorscheCooled is probably the best one because it's about the PorscheCooled podcast. And I'll get back to you and we can schedule a time. Like I said, those of you who know, all the Owner Stories I've done through Zoom. They're done through Zoom. We record it. We have a chat. We have the video on. A lot of people say, do you have the video on? Yes, have the video on, but that's just to see you guys when I'm talking to you so we don't try to cut each other off and talk over each other. And that's about it. Never use the video. We just use the audio. And it's a great hour. It goes very, very quickly. The owner's story that I recorded last night that's coming up, I had a really good chat with Devon, who's coming up. Him and I chatted for like an hour and a half. So sometimes I go a bit over, but I hope you guys are still enjoying the Owner Stories series. And speaking of the Owner Stories, I just want to say thank you as well, because I noticed from the stats, you guys must have been really hanging out for the PorscheCooled podcast to return, because I noticed the stats on Tuesday when I launched Philip's Owner Stories episode. They were way higher than they usually are. They really peaked. They really spiked. So thank you for that. You guys were obviously waiting for a new episode. And like I said, I do apologize for the 2 weeks off. But after coming back from Dubai, and I'm actually still recovering. I'm still really, really tired. But I just couldn't have done it with the projects that we were doing there. And I know a lot of you guys, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here. And I know a lot of you guys always ask me, what are you doing in Dubai? What are you doing on these things? Without going too deep into it, the reason why everything was a bit crazy over the last 5 months, and I've been saying it on the podcast quite a lot, and you guys know all about it, is because we've been doing a lot of projects at Expo Dubai, which Expo Dubai 2020, it's still called Expo Dubai 2020. If you don't know what Expo is like the World Fair. Eiffel Tower was a souvenir from the Expo of all those years ago. So we did a lot of projects there. A lot of the projects we started in late 2017, 2018, started the work on them. And when I say work on them, it's like the exhibition design, the AV, working out all the message and the story for the client. We have a lot of Middle Eastern clients, a lot of countries, a lot of the Gulf states primarily. So we did a lot of pavilions in the Gulf states. Some of them we saw through, one of them we saw through to execution. The other ones we left in 2020, basically. We left them in 2020, but we did the whole concept and, planning and everything of all the exhibits and all the story. So that's kind of a very vague, I know, but very sort of brief explanation of what I do, because I get a lot of questions, people asking what are you doing in Dubai and what work do you do? So, but the most exciting one we did, and I'll mention it because I think it's very well done. The project that we'd had to finish in 4.5 months, which is really fast track. Client came in very late due due to various reasons, and if I mention the name of the country, I think some of you will know, but Qatar, we worked on the Qatar Pavilion at Expo Dubai. We did the architecture was done by an architect called Santiago Calatrava. Santiago Calatrava, for those of you in New York, you'll be familiar with that name from the World Trade Center site. And we did the exhibition design and exhibition for that with all the AV and all the content, programming, etc., through the various partners that we use around the world. Turned out to be really good. It's really successful. If you do a search for it, if you see the interiors, that's what we did, all the exhibits and the interiors. Not the interior architecture, the interior as in the exhibition. So that was that. We did that. We're in Dubai for 16 days. We stayed at a very good hotel there. It's not probably the sort of hotel we would usually stay in. We stayed in a hotel called the Kempinski. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Kempinski Hotel, which is at the Mall of the Emirates, primarily because it was easy when you're doing these sort of jobs and you leave in the morning at like 8 and you get back at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. You just want something that's easy and central, and if you need to get food quickly, there's restaurants close by and there's things in the hotel. And luckily the hotel is, I guess, a luxury hotel, but it's comfortable because the rooms were like suites, and when the room is like a suite and you're kind of living there, it is a lot more comfortable and you have a lot more space. So my wife and I had a lot more space there, and it was easy to work because we were doing work as well on the fly of an evening, just getting things organized, changing content, getting the people who are making the content for us in Malaysia and the UK to do changes, etc. So all those sort of things that we're doing last minute to get everything ready for the opening, which was on the 1st of October. So that's that. That's where I was in Dubai. Oh, and anyone who's listening from the UAE or from Dubai, I don't know how you stand the heat. I thought Bahrain was hot. And I know we were outside a lot because we were walking around a lot on Expo once it opened, looking at other pavilions and seeing what other technology and exhibits people have been doing. But it was just unbearable. Dubai was just unbearable. The days were like, for those of you who don't live in a hot climate, the temperature was 38. It felt like 47. And we're walking around a lot of the time. The thing that I did really find interesting, and I'll get back onto the Porsche thing in a minute, the thing I found really quite amazing is I've never ever seen a proper sandstorm before. And we actually got to the expo site before opening, and I think it was about a few days before opening, and we were in the pavilion and someone said, you got to look outside. And you looked outside, you couldn't see anything. It was a sandstorm. I've never ever seen a sandstorm before. People were running to get under cover. So that was a first. That was a first. But I like Dubai. I mean, it's okay. I don't think I could live there. It's a bit too fast-paced for me. People say it's like Vegas. I don't think it's like Vegas at all. But, it was good. People were friendly. Food, there was good enough food there. And they've got a metro there now, so the metro was easy to get around. So that's a bit of a lowdown on where I've been. That's what I've been doing. We got back the other night, like I said. And I've done a couple of owner stories recordings. And today I was kind of left up a tree, so to speak, because I didn't know what to do because Steve isn't able to do it. I was going to reach out to Ajmal or someone else to come and do it, but it was a little bit last minute notice. And I know Ajmal, you're probably listening and going, it would have been fine. But I always feel bad when I just call someone the night before saying, can you be on a podcast, or call them and say, can you do it in the next couple of hours? It always makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. So that's why I've decided today that I didn't want you guys to miss out. Just give you a bit of an update of what's going on. And we have an episode for today. What else? I was just in the gym, actually, and I just listened to Spike's Car Radio, the Seinfeld rant one. I have to say, I really enjoy those episodes when Seinfeld and Zuckerman and Spike are together. I really think that Seinfeld and Zuckerman should have their own podcast. I think together they are even better than Spike. I find them really, really funny. I keep going back to that really early episode where him and Seinfeld were just hilarious. Once again, a really good podcast. I think anyone that's into Porsches, you really, when there's episodes like that on where it's really Porsche-centric, which it was today, Porsche-centric, and comedy as well, they really are, they're a really good episode. The more and more I look, actually, and people have said this, the more and more I look, finding a podcast that's just Porsche there's not that many, there's not that many. I'm not going to name the usual suspects, but there's a handful of us that are doing it, and I guess it is because it is very selective. And doing a podcast on Porsche is not, I'm not saying it's difficult, because for me it's just, I'm always thinking about it. Like I'm always thinking about watches. I'm always thinking about the Porsche. Everyone knows I'm still hankering for another one. I'm trying hard to like work out when I can do it. Those of you who know that we're still kind of trapped a little bit, so we can't go back to Australia. But I'm trying to work out what to do with this car situation. I'm trying to work out what classic to buy. It's weird, you know, like I've never been a big fan, and I've said it before, I've never been a huge fan of the 356. And I want to get into this with another thought I had when I was in the gym just before I came down from the gym. I've never been a big fan of the 356. I really appreciate them. Like I said, years ago, I knew someone in Sydney that used to drive around in the Cabriolet one when they were cheap, when they were super cheap. And I've spoken to PJ, who's got his 356, Mark from Mark and Cars, Stone City Outlaw with his 356. You know, so there's been a lot of people on Owner Stories talking about the 356, and then I just listened to that podcast upstairs with Seinfeld, and he's saying if you want to experience the Porsche brand, you should, I think he said it's like an early 911, a 356C, and a Beetle. If you want to know what the essence of Porsche is, what Porsche is all about. And he made that good point about the 356C, that it's been honed and finessed over so many years when they got to the C, that the C is like, to him, you know, it just shows you their way of thinking, I guess, their way of, their DNA. It's their DNA is embedded in that car, because they most cars are finished after a 7-year run. That car, I can't remember how many years it ran for, but that car ran for much longer than that, the 356. And he said, you know, it's almost like, I guess it's almost striving for perfection. I'll get my words out. Striving for perfection. But even with new models of Porsche, we know that. You know, we do know that. We know that Porsche is always fine-tuning, you know what I mean? But, you know, I was thinking about this and I thought, you know, from the 996 to the 997, you know, is the 997, I know it's a different generation, it's 997 or whatever, but it is the 996 to the 997, is it really like a continuous flow? I mean, do you see, you know, that 356, like what Seinfeld was saying about the 356, you know, to the 356C, it's been around for so many years, that they're just gradually, and obviously because they didn't have the money to bring out a new model, and you know that's probably why they were doing it, but they're obviously finessing things and fine-tuning things in the process of that from the A to the B to the C, you know what I mean? So is the 996 in a way, 996, 997, is it just really like it's a continuation, isn't it? It really is like one model. The one model that, you know, it goes from air-cooled, it goes into water-cooled, and you have the 996, so the 996 is the first water-cooled. And then it slowly progresses to the 997. And sure, the 997 was different on the interior, but we all know it shared parts, it shared, you know, it also shared the issues with the IMS. And then it goes into the 997. And then, you know, and I know some of you guys are going to be not agreeing with me here, but then you go into the 991. So is that still a continuation to the 991? What I'm trying to get at is that is a Porsche 911 line, is it really 7 years or whatever it is that they make them for? Or is it actually longer than that? Because a 996 and 997 could almost be one generation. It's just a progression of that generation to something better at the end. From the 997 to the 991, the 991 changes again. The 991 to me is like the 991 to the 992 almost. It feels like that is the grouping that I would put. I guess you could almost put the grouping with the 997, but to me it's almost like it becomes more modern, 991 into 992. You know, so is it like two generations? I don't know if you can do the same thing with the 964 to 993. I'm not sure. I don't think I know enough about the 964 and the 993 to see if that is almost like, you know, it's almost like when Porsche do their planning. They don't plan for a 7-year period. They actually do plan for a 14-year period. I think the 356 was around for 14 years, wasn't it? 14 years? Maybe it's longer. But you know what I mean? Like it's that planning, you know, it's that, I don't know, it's that planning of, you know, we can't do everything in one generation, but we'll follow it into the next generation and we'll make that car, even though it's a different, we'll call it 997 instead of 996. It kind of is still a progression from the very first 996. Anyway, that's what I was thinking when I was in the gym before. I don't know if it's true or not. Let me know anyway. Send me a DM and let me know if you think I'm on the right track or I've gone completely mental, crazy. let me just read a couple of reviews out. I had a couple of Apple ratings and reviews. As I've always said, Apple ratings and reviews really do help us become the number one Porsche podcast. I know we're never going to beat Spike, and I know we're never going to beat Smoking Tire, but it's kind of cool to see us up in the same level of those guys. And, you know, in a lot of countries, we actually have been, and it's kind of surprising. It's surprising. I send them to Steve every now and again so Steve can see it too. It's humbling. It's kind of weird. Like in Norway and Switzerland, and I know we have a lot of people who listen from both those countries, you know, we've been in the top 5, top 3, I think, in Norway. And, you know, obviously this changes all the time. It's very dynamic, the charts, the Apple podcast charts for automotive. That's why when I hear other podcasts talking about it, how they're number one, you don't stay number one because it depends on your downloads. It depends on how many people are listening. So it's very dynamic. It changes all the time. It's not a static figure. It doesn't stay there for weeks on end. But the Scandinavian country, you know, Norway and Sweden, very popular PorscheCooled podcast. Malaysia, I want to say thank you to all the Malaysian listeners. It's really cool. Costa Rica, once again, thank you. And of course, not forgetting you guys in the US. You know, we're high in the US chart, high that I never thought we'd be that high. And for me, high in the US is in the top 50. If we're in the top 50, I think that's pretty cool. UK, of course, and Australia. New Zealand as well, for all our New Zealand listeners and New Zealand owners that have been on owner stories before. I guess that's always helped us being seen in New Zealand. But there's so many countries to list. I can't list all of them, but I just want to say, you know, I looked at it when I got back to Bahrain because I hadn't looked at it over the past 16 days. I've kind of been a little bit like Porscheless over the past 16 days. Those of you who follow me on Instagram would have seen I posted a few images here and there on michael.bath on my personal Instagram of Expo and stuff we're doing in Dubai. And I also, you know, I was still doing PorscheCooled Instagram, but I really, you know, my head was elsewhere. It was really busy. I was struggling to keep up just with doing that. In fact, the last night in Dubai, I had to edit Philip's episode to put up for you guys because on Patreon the episode goes up on the Monday. And it goes up on the Monday 24 hours early. That's one of the benefits of being a Patreon member by joining PorscheCooled Exclusive or Exclusive Plus. And so I literally hadn't edited that episode. I should have done it before I left Bahrain. And then I was so tired I had to do it the night before we flew out of Dubai. But it all worked out in the end, and it's a really good episode. Anyway, Apple ratings and reviews. I'm going to read this 3 of them. And like I said, I really like getting Apple ratings and reviews because, as I said, it's you guys take the time, you appreciate us, and you take the time. It's like becoming a member of Patreon. If you don't want to become a member of Patreon, you know, give us a review or give us a rating on Apple. You know, spend a bit of time and just write a quick review. It really does help us. It really does help us get seen by other Porsche enthusiasts, Porsche owners that are still coming to the podcast. This is what I find quite amazing. All you guys found us. A lot of you guys found us, you know, a long time ago. A lot of you guys knew me from YouTube, you know, have spoken to me on the YouTube channel when I used to post more Porsche videos. So a lot of you guys already knew of me, and that's why you found the podcast. Some people have no idea who I am, and I found a lot of people have said to me, I think in the last week I had about 3 people saying, you know, just found the podcast, it's great, started to listen from the beginning, which is fantastic, and that's what I like. And, you know, friends of friends who are people who have been on owner stories, you know, like Alan, and then, you know, Philip this week is Alan's friend, and then there's Brian, who was on a couple of weeks back with his 996 cab. From his friend Devon is coming up in the following week. See what I mean? I can't speak properly. He's coming up in the following weeks. So it's great when friends introduce friends and then friends come on the podcast. I really like that. And what I want to do too is I want to do this thing where maybe you guys come back and talk about, did you keep the car? Did you get rid of the car? You know, have you changed anything on the car? Especially people who have been restoring their car, which they've had a few now, and how it was once you got it delivered. Stephen in Sydney with his 66 Hot Rod 912. I've got a really good owner stories coming up about the previous owner who owned that car. I know some of you guys know who it is, and I'm going to keep that a secret, but the previous owner of Stephen's car, who's just bought another very, very special car from someone else that's been on owner stories from Australia. So that's a really good one coming up, and that could even be, it's not next week, it's the week after next. Okay, I'm getting distracted. The 3 reviews. First one, thank you very much to ITS 911. PorscheCooled is tops. I have a special interest in pre-73 Porsches, but also am open to a modern Porsche ownership. The more I listen, the more open-minded I become. Thanks to Michael and Steve and the Porsche owners, Jeff in Sydney. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the review. Next one, insightful Aussie Porsche banter. I like that title. It's a good title. Michael and Steve represent a perfect duo in the insightful Porsche banter fit for the ordinary working person. The PorscheCooled podcast was one of the first podcasts I found during COVID and inspired me to purchase my first Porsche 993 Tip Cab. And I have the opportunity to expand a collection in the past 18 months, including 2 GT3s. They question our why and evoke our FOMO, fear of missing out, of course, to explore this reliable, exciting, exhilarating brand, which is the Porsche Cult. 5 stars from the Rundock. Rundock in Australia. Thank you so much for that. Really good review. I wish I had 2 GT3s. That's all I can say. Third one is my favorite car podcast. This is from the Dacta in US. Michael and his show are fantastic. A wealth of knowledge on many things 911, a fresh perspective on 996s and the Who Porsche culture. Owner stories always something I look forward to. Michael has a great way of telling stories and leaving his listeners the information that is both informative and entertaining. As a car nut, I just can't get enough. Thank you so much. Very, very kind review. Thank you so much to the 3 reviews this week. And like I said, I like to read them out. I hope you guys don't get bored with it because I really do think, you take the effort to do it. It's I like to read them out so you guys can hear what other people are thinking. So where have I been? I already covered that. I've been in Dubai, like I said. Today, in that thought process about the merging of models, the cloudiness between the transition between a 996 and a 997 and the overlap. I guess that's what you call it, right? It's a good transition, You're making content, you're making film for an exhibition or whatever. It's that transition that where you don't see the change, or you see the change, but the change is acceptable and it's slightly different, but then it all comes together as one. And I kind of think that's how Porsche do things. I mean, this is just my opinion, is how Porsche do things. But this gets me on to values. And the reason why I want to talk about values is because Steve's not here. No offense, Steve. I know Steve doesn't like to talk about values all the time, and I don't like to talk about values either because I'm not sitting here thinking, okay, my car is worth this much now, so I'm feeling like I can go out and buy myself a new watch or something. It's not that kind of thing, or or maybe I can sell it or whatever. But then it kind of comes back to that, and this is what I want to talk about, and this is kind of what the episode, apart from an update, is kind of loosely based around what I call the new air-cooled. I think I might even call it that. I wrote it down when I was in the gym, the new air-cooled. So, let's think about 996 owners. Let's think about 996 owners and 997 owners. And I remember being in Autohouse Hamilton, and I remember overhearing a conversation, and this was many years ago. It's probably when I first got my car, so probably 4 years ago. And it was a gentleman that had a couple of air-cooleds. He had a couple of 3.2 Carrera or something else. And I remember talking to one of the guys that worked there at the time who's no longer there. And it's like, a lot of these people, he said to me, that a lot of them, they don't know what to do. They've had this car. They've had this 911, which may have been worth, 20 to 30,000 Australian dollars. And now, all of a sudden, their car is worth, 120, 130. Obviously, much more now. This was at the time. And now their car is worth 130,000. And, and I guess it's like, well, what do you do? Do you preserve it? Do you do all the work on it and preserve it so it's original? Do you just leave it because the value's gone up anyway and it doesn't really matter what happens after that because you've already made, if you bought it for 20 grand or 30 grand and you bought a couple of them, you've tripled, quadrupled your money. Or do you just sell it and then buy something else? Do you sell it? And I guess at the time, would you have sold it? Would you sell one of your air-cooleds or both your air-cooleds and buy a new 911 or put it towards a new 911? For me, that's not good financial advice. I wouldn't do that. But, it's kind of what us 996 and 997 owners, and you guys know that I own a 997.1. And the reason why I've been thinking about this is because I've just literally yesterday contacted Porsche Insurance. And I contacted Porsche Insurance because I really do need to increase the value of my car. My car at the moment is undervalued. I'm not going to tell you the value. I might have said it in a previous episode, but I don't want to repeat it now. My car is undervalued, and I think it's undervalued by, well, this is a tricky bit. I don't know how much it's undervalued by, but I contacted Porsche Insurance, and I know Stephen in Sydney, who has the 912, the hot rod that's being done up. He said I should look at Shannon's, and a couple of other people have also told me I should go to Shannon's. For the international listeners, Shannon's Insurance in Australia, I guess you could probably say the comparison brand is probably Haggerty, I guess. And I know that a lot of the international listeners have told me that Haggerty is very good with agreed value. And I think I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed with Porsche Insurance because it's like, I know I'll explain it, but Porsche Insurance in Australia, obviously the underwriter Porsche is not selling you the policy. There's the underwriter that's selling you the policy, whoever that may be, Alliance or whoever Porsche has this policy with. The thing is, I don't like the fact that you always have to explain to them or convince them that their 997 Carrera is worth more than the value that they put on it. I don't understand how a Porsche Insurance... Now, if I was going to a company like NRMA in Australia, which is a motoring sort of assistance sort of company that's been around for years for international visitors that don't know about it, like the RACV what is it in UK? I can't even remember what it's called. So, there's other companies that have insurance, but they're not called Porsche Insurance. If you're called Porsche Insurance, don't you think that you should know what your market is? Don't you think you should know that there's been a sudden increase in prices of 996s, which is domino effect into 997s, that 996s are now worth, where you could have got one for 40, now you're getting them for 80. And I want to come back onto the value, and I've noticed this on Greg's side in the US on his Instagram, First Flat 6. If you haven't been to Greg's Instagram, make sure you follow him. Greg was on earlier owner stories. And he always puts cars that have sold, 996s that have sold at crazy prices. I think he had a C4S there the other day that sold at quite a high price for, based on US pricing. So, you've got this thing where this trend where, classic car market is going crazy. Porsche prices are going crazy. 996s are no longer a cheap alternative. People are starting to see the 996, see the design of the 996 and really appreciate the design, where some people were always hating upon it. But Porsche don't seem to know the value of their brand, Porsche Insurance, which distresses me. So I've given them a chance here. I sent them a thing saying I wanted to increase the value of my car due to these reasons. I gave them 3 ads of 997s that were for sale in Australia. Most of them were 120. I think it was 110, 120, and 120. I left it at that. I do have ads for 996s, and I want to talk about the one ad that I saw today, actually. So I gave them that information. She came back. Very helpful, the girl at Porsche Insurance. She's a very lovely lady that's been helping me for the last 3 years. She's been there for 3 or 4 years now. So she said, I need pictures of the inside of your car, I need pictures of the exterior of your car, and I need a picture of your odometer. Not just how many kilometers does it have. They want to see the odometer because that has to go to the underwriter. So that was yesterday. I haven't had a response back yet. So I'm going to be interested. I'm going to tell you guys what they come back with. At the moment, I'm waiting to see what it is. I think my car is minimum 30,000 Australian dollars underinsured. Minimum. But today, I found an ad. Well, I saw an ad, and I sent it to Steve, and I sent it to a couple of people. I sent it to Marco, actually, Marco in Sydney as well, Steve's cousin, who has the 996 Turbo. It's a 2001 Porsche 911 Carrera 996. It's in manual, 84,000 kilometers. So what's that, 45,000 miles or something like that? Something like that, I think. And yesterday, actually, it's a very weird ad. I don't understand these people. When you put an ad on a car site, if you're subscribed to that ad, you'll get the alerts when the price changes. This car yesterday was 108,000 Australian dollars. Now, do the calculation very quickly, but that's 108,000 Australian dollars for a 2001 996 Carrera. Speed yellow, pretty standard, no crazy options, nothing at all, in a really good condition from New South Wales. Beautiful car. And I'm not saying the guy's asking too much for it. I'm just saying the prices now, I mean, he's taken it down by 10 grand. So it's now 98,000. But that's 98,000 for a 2001 996. 98,000 is more, quite significantly a lot more than what my car has been valued at by Porsche Insurance. This is why it's a bit odd. This is why I think value is a bit crazy. And then you've got the GT3s. Now, we've spoken about GT3s before, and I know this is a worldwide trend, but there's a speed yellow GT3. It's a touring. It doesn't have the racing seats. Same color as John, who's been on Owner's Stories. And that's 295,000 Australian dollars. So 300,000 Australian dollars, a little bit more when you pay stamp duty. 300,000 Australian dollars. I don't know the exact conversion in my head at the moment, but it's, you're talking about a 996 GT3, which was sitting in the high 100s, say 12 months ago. So we're in this situation now where people have had these cars. If you've had a 996 GT3 and you've had it since it was 99,000, you've had it for 10 years or 8 years, all of a sudden you're sitting on this amount of money, and it's like, it's the same dilemma I think that people who had air-cooled cars encountered. First thing you have to do is make sure you get it insured at the right value. Because if you go onto Red Book in Australia, which is the value site like Blue Book, Kelly Blue Book, I think, if you go onto that site, I guarantee that the price they have a 996 GT3 for is not even close to 295,000. And car dealers in Australia always tend to look at that Red Book. Oh, they go, the Red Book price is this. So when you're selling, it's always the Red Book price. And when you're buying, the Red Book price is always incorrect. And that's kind of the trend. And I don't know when these sort of figures are going to come up to date, because I don't know what the insurance companies, the underwriters, the insurance companies, look at, what data they're looking at. But I remember when I first insured my car, they sent me links from car sales saying that car sales, there were these cars on car sales and this was the value. So if they come back to me now and say, we don't look at car sales, it's like, well, you don't look at car sales when I'm querying it, but when you're telling me how much it's worth, you say you look at car sales. It's the same situation with these value sites. So I found a few 996s. There was the 1999 GT3, 295,000, plus the stamp duty, so it's probably closer to 320. And then there's this one, which I noticed James at Porsche Platts put a post on Porsche Forums Australia. James has been on Owner's Stories before. There's an 07 GT3 997 manual. Steve's is an 08, I think. It's in silver. I'm looking at the ad now. I don't know if it has seats or not. In fact, the pictures are very interesting because... this is very interesting. This has got a sunroof. This looks like it has a sunroof. I don't know if this is the same car. Let me just read it quickly. Yeah, look, it's got a full titanium exhaust, comes with the old exhaust. It's got 71,000 kilometers, full service history. It looks like there's a sunroof. I can't even see it, but they're not showing the seats. Oh, it doesn't have the racing seats. It's just got the normal. It doesn't have the lightweight buckets. This looks I don't know whether this is the reason why that post was up. This is very similar to the one that was sold recently, which didn't sell for 307,000. Anyway, the thing is, another one. This one didn't go down. This one went up. It was 297 yesterday. It's now 307, almost 308,000 Australian dollars. Plus you add the stamp duty on, you're probably up for another, 10 or so. So it's probably more like 320,000 Australian dollars for a 2007 GT3. Now, you've got that dilemma. I keep coming back to this dilemma. The dilemma being, the new air-cooled. And when I say the new air-cooled, I mean the experience that people had to go through with their air-cooleds when they increased in value. And of course, a 3.2 Carrera G50 isn't 130,000 Australian dollars now. It's more like 200,000. You know what I mean? So, you've got the things with insurance. Then you've got the thing about, do I keep it or do I sell it? And I think that's the hardest one. Because the worst thing you can have is regrets. The worst thing you can have is, unless you're like a billionaire like a Jerry Seinfeld, where you can keep buying back your cars at higher prices. A lot of us, is like when you sell something, it's hard to get it back. One, it's hard to find it. Two, the person that bought it may not want to sell it unless you sell it to a friend or something. But, when you get to this situation, like a 996 Carrera, if your 996 Carrera that you have 80,000 kilometers on it, say this yellow one sells close to that mark. Say it is a $100,000 car now. It's a $100,000 car. Now, most people who have 996s aren't original owners. I'm guessing there's a few people that probably did pick them up when they were 39, 49,000. I'm guessing there's some people that also picked them up when they were probably a little bit higher than that. Maybe they were a little bit higher. Maybe they were 120 and they picked them up when they were just sort of coming down in price. The thing about the 996 is that the 996 did bottom out a lot more than the 997. The 997 hasn't really, and I mentioned this when we were chatting with Steve, weeks back. The 997 hasn't really bottomed out that much, which I find interesting, but I think the 997 has really been helped by the 996. I think the 996 took the full force of the hammer, so to speak, and the 997 kind of missed it. And it looks like it's missed it for good, because if 997s are 120, but if this 996 Carrera, if you're looking at 100,000 for a 996 Carrera, in my mind, then the 997 Carrera should be even more than that. But this is what I keep coming back to. What do? Do you keep it or do you sell it? I don't want to sell my 997. Would I sell it to get into a 991.2 GT3? Possibly. Would I sell it to get into a good example of a 911T? Possibly. Would I sell it just to get a 912? No. Would I buy a 912 to have alongside the 997? In a perfect world, if I have enough funds, yes. 911T against the 997 Carrera, I don't think I could afford a 911T or a 911E with both cars, having the Carrera 997 and the 911T. And then you think, even if my car is worth 120,000 Australian dollars, just to say conservatively, it's now 120. Easy still, I can sell it for 120. 52,000 kilometers, immaculate condition, 120,000. What can I sell? What can I buy into for 120,000? You still have to add quite a lot of money. I can't, even if I was thinking about getting a GT3, a 991.2 GT3, you're still looking at adding in another 230,000. And then you're getting rid of a car like, I'm sure there's a lot of people with regrets that sold their, 87, 88, 3.2 Carrera G50. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are regretting that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have sold a 911T. An ex-boss of mine, ex-guy I used to work with, he had a 911T. And, he paid $35,000 for it. I mean, that's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. It's 20 years ago. But he paid 35,000 Australian dollars for it. And you think about the price of Ts now. But then you also think about the price, and I was having this discussion with Devon, who's coming up on Owner Stories, with the cost of, restoration. The cost of restoration, like we touched on in the last episode with Steve. The cost of restoration, if you get it done at Porsche Classic, and you're looking at 300,000 plus to restore your car, it's a big investment. So this is what I'm saying. I mean, obviously the 996 and 997s aren't in need of full restoration. Most of them are still pretty good, most of them. But what do you do? What do you do? And this is why I think, 996 and 997 owners in the next, and maybe it hasn't happened yet, maybe this is just the start of it, but I think in the next 18 months, I think the market is still going to get stronger for 996s and 997s. There's very little supply in Australia if you look online, especially for a manual, very little supply. Obviously, the people who are hanging on to the 0.2 997s are probably, laughing because they've got such a great, if you're thinking about money value, they're sitting on a great investment. But for my situation, it's like I just want to make sure my car's insured to the right value, and I want to make sure that if I do sell it, whatever I sell it for is going to give me that same experience and same feeling. I am a bit sentimental. And I know this comes into Porsche ownership. I'm a bit sentimental because it is my first 911. It is my first Porsche. And part of me wants to just keep it. Part of me just wants to keep it, and I want to look back in 20 years and think, wow, I bought that way back in, whatever year it was, 2017. Some part of me wants to have that feeling, to look back at it and say, I held onto this car, and then maybe it's time to let it go to someone who's going to look after it. But I don't want to miss out on other experiences. And this is the borderline. This is the line here where you have to take. I don't want to miss out on other experiences. And I know a lot of people I've made friends with through this podcast are experiencing new experiences now. They're buying they're buying cheaper cars, but they're getting other Porsches, and they're going to enjoy that Porsche because they want to have those experiences. I still, as I say to the guys in the UK, I'm still getting a 912. I would love, of course, when I say 912, I really like a 69. I know the S short wheelbases are supposed to be, long wheelbase was always better. 69s, S short wheelbase are probably, I think now the general opinion is they're better. I remember Seinfeld was talking about it today. I don't know enough about that to comment, but it's an interesting sort of thing to think about. I know I want one of those earlier 911s or 912s. I'm happy to get a 912, like I said. If a 911 came up at the right price, which I don't think it will, I would probably get the 911 instead, 60s 911. But now I'm also tempted, so I want to experience that. But then, I'm starting to think I wouldn't mind experiencing a 356. And it's not just from the podcast I heard today, but it's from talking to previous owners, and I have been looking at them, but 356s are so expensive, and that's the problem. They're so expensive. I just want to experience that classic car. But do I get rid of my modern, so-called almost modern 997, which has gone up in value, to buy the classic car? This is the thing. Current car, you've got, memories. You've got the fact that it is your first car. It is the car that, I guess, launched everything for me. This whole podcast and everything is because of that car. So there's a lot involved in it, and it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to part with it. And this is where emotion overrules money. You know what I mean? It's not always about the money. It's about the feeling. It's about the experience. But I do want to experience new Porsche, models. I do want to experience, older ones. I want to experience the newer ones. I'd love to have a drive in a 992 just to see how it feels. I'd love to drive a 356. Like I've said, I've driven Beetles before and things like that, but I'd love to drive a 356. I've never driven a 912 I've been in, obviously, a 70s 911. I haven't driven one, but I've been in it. I know the experience. I know the noise of it. I know all that side of it, and I like it. It's like being in an air-cooled. You know that it's a completely different experience to your car. It's like being in Steve's GT3, completely different experience to my 997 due to the seats and the sound and the gearing. And that's what Porsche ownership is all about. That's what the Porsche thing is all about. We want to experience as much as we possibly can. I understand why people have multiple Porsches in their garage. It makes sense. It makes sense that we keep looking. This joke that we always laugh about, we can't stop looking. You get something and then you want something else. It's because we want to experience the brand. We want to experience every part of the brand. And I really do like what Philip said in Owner's Stories. Every model is important. Every model is important. It's all part of Porsche's history. I'm probably not quoting you right, Philip, sorry. But it's all part of Porsche's history, and they all come together. It's the DNA of the brand, and we shouldn't be like hating on someone because they have a Boxster, or hating on someone because they only have a 944, or hating on someone because, you only have the 911 Carrera, not the Carrera S. And I know a lot of you guys don't do that, but there is some of that in the community, and we shouldn't, because I think Philip said it perfectly. Every model is important. Every model was important at that point in time, and that's a really good way of looking at it. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's kind of where I'm thinking. That's what I was thinking today. Like I said, I was just thinking when I was in the gym earlier. I think that's about it. I think you guys are probably at the limit of hearing me talking to myself. It's a bit like the old episodes, isn't it? When I first started. If you haven't heard those episodes, they used to go for 22 minutes. And I used to just chat with myself here in Bahrain. I think it was the start of lockdown when I started getting back into the podcast. So it's, 2020, beginning of 2020. The podcast has been going now since 2019. It's been going for 2 years, believe it or not. I noticed that on Apple the other day. It said 2019 to 2021, which is kind of crazy in itself. All right, guys. Hopefully Steve is back next week. Hopefully he's going to be here and we can have a chat again. And just reconnect on what's been going on with him. I know he's been detailing his GT3. I think he's almost finished. He's been doing it section at a time. What else? For those of you who asked me, yes, I did get the LatheWorks knob and shifter. I am getting one of those. Marco, who's been on Owner Stories before, Steve's cousin, who's got the yellow 996 Turbo. Marco placed the order for us. Thank you, Marco. I know it was a bit of a hassle and you have to go through a long process. Marco's placed the order. He's getting one. I'm getting one. I think he's getting something else as well. So I'm looking forward to getting that when I'm back in Sydney. I just got the black with the white engraving, silver, just the plain sort of lathe works. So I'll try that out. See if I like it. See if it feels better than the stock shifter. I may get a shifter from Carbone, possibly. But I want to see what the black one's like first. The Latherworks looks like a really good quality from what Steve sent me images of. But I did order that. Someone asked me the other day, did I get one? I haven't got it yet. Marco's ordered it. It takes some time. If you want one of those, you should place your order because he's getting busier and busier, and he's only one guy with two hands. Two hands, as he says. All right, guys, I think that's it. I'm going to leave the podcast here. I'm going to edit it very quickly, and I'm going to put it up for you guys on Patreon, which it usually goes up in less than an hour's time. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks so much for all the support, and that's about it. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.